Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sabrina Spector. I'm the Associate Director of the JCRC, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. If you'd all please rise for the Hatikva. And direct your attention to our screen for this historic moment.
Good morning. Come on, you guys can do better than that. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Jeffrey Apel, President of the Jewish Community Relations Council, and I welcome all of you to our 53rd Annual Middle East Institute. This is the first MEI that we've had live with a virtual component in 2 years. It was so nice to be able to break bread with Ambassador Friedman and Tammy, and many others at our event, and many of our event sponsors earlier this morning. And really great seeing all of you here live and in person. But no, we are equally appreciative of the hundreds of guests joining us virtually as well. Thank you so much to Team Y and Y, Yaakov Begley and Yaakov Fuchs, for their committee, for their incredible hard work and stewardship in getting us here on relatively short notice, no less. A special shout out to Sabrina Spector, our fearless Associate Director, along with Aaron Sauer, Sarah Fortney, and Dave Snyder, and the rest of the professional staff for their talents and dedication to our agency. I would now like to take a moment to recognize our lead sponsors. Marvin and Eve Schlanger, who have always been and continue to be true community visionaries. We are grateful for the generosity of Gigi and Brad Schwartz and M&T Bank, as well as the supporter of today's honoree, Jerry and Joachim Rudoler, the Herzberg, Sandler, and Rudoler families, Ann E. Coons, and M. Rosenblatt Roofing. You're allowed to clap, it's okay. Please take a moment to peruse our program guide to acknowledge the commitment to our vital mission from our numerous sponsors and patrons. Thank you for helping to power all that we do at the JCRC and for helping to foster and strengthen our community's connection to Israel. The Middle East Institute is JCRC's annual program which seeks to educate our community on issues and topics affecting Israel and the Middle East. I want to acknowledge that we have members of other religious faith communities in attendance and participating virtually, and on behalf of all of us at the JCRC, I want to thank you for your friendship, support, and partnership. Lastly, I want to acknowledge the President of the Jewish Federation, Harry Platt, and CEO Jen Weiss, who are also both with us this morning. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Rabbi Michael Davies for the Devar Torah. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a bit of an introduction for me, so it's wonderful to see you all and to meet many of you this morning for the first time. I want to thank Jeff Appel and Associate Director Sabrina Spector, as well as the rest of the JCRC, and to Yafa Fuchs and Yaakov Bagley and all those who helped to bring this event to its fruition. The general breakdown of the last few Torah portions that we've read lists the building plans for the Mishkan, the tabernacle, or what I like to refer to as the Porta Temple. Yesterday, we read in the Torah portion of Tetzaveh about the priestly garments that were worn by the Kohanim, the priests, and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, in the service in the temple. But there's a short section at the beginning of that Torah portion that speaks to something a little bit perhaps off topic. It says, V'ata tetzaveh El bnei Yisrael v'yikchu elecha shemen zayit zach katit lamaor l'halot ner tamid. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling the lamps regularly. A beautiful thing to light the menorah. But what's it doing here in the construction of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan? We have all of the different discussions of the various elements, the incense altar, but no incense. The showbread table, but no showbread. Why the oil for the menorah mentioned here? The Tosafists, the grandchildren and students of the great medieval Jewish commentary, Rashi, suggest the following. They say, what constitutes the completion of a building? Now, as Ambassador Friedman would know, and many others I imagine in the room, you should not ask that question to a kabbalan, an Israeli contractor, because you'll probably leave the conversation with some confusion. But a building is completed when it's fit to enter. But if a building is a palace for a king, a house for God, it is not fit for the divine unless it is illuminated. A king will not enter a dark abode. And the components of what qualifies as construction of a place, if it is a royal palace, includes not only walls and a roof, but also light. And what we see from this is when we bring God into the picture, light is structural, not only functional. And sometimes that light is created, as in this past week's Torah portion, through the oil of the menorah. Sometimes that light shines through activism, such as that of our award recipients today, Joachim Rudoler and Rebecca Raush, being celebrated this morning, and we all have a responsibility to follow their lead. And sometimes that light is brought in by breaking down the walls, perhaps with a sledgehammer, and letting the light in. On that note, we thank you, Ambassador Friedman, for helping to provide that light, for serving this, our country, the United States of America, and the Holy Land, God's palace, the land of Israel. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Randy Stupler, and it gives me great pleasure to present today's JCRC's Young Adult Israel Advocacy Leadership Award. The JCRC recognizes the challenges facing our youth today. We have historically offered teen programs to learn how to advocate for the state of Israel, stand up against anti-Semitism, and to be an involved citizen through our various programs. We hope to provide a toolkit of resources for our kids to handle any situation when considering the nominations for this award. We looked for a future leader, one who proudly stands up for their beliefs and passionately stands behind Israel. Rebecca Raush is all that and more. A student at Rutgers University, Rebecca has a long and impressive resume advocating for Israel. She has participated in many different leadership and Israel education opportunities, including leadership roles in USY, attending APAC Policy Conference, and serving as a Stand With Us Leventhal High School intern. Today, she is the co-founder of A Peace is Possible, a pro-Israel club with the goal of creating healthy dialogue around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We are honored to present the Young Adult Israel Advocacy Leadership Award to Rebecca. Mazel tov.
Thank you so much. Should I leave this on?
You can take it off.
Well, short. Thank you so much to the JCRC for awarding me with the Young Adult Israel Advocacy Award. Israel Advocacy has played such a major part in my life and has helped me find my voice in so many ways. Due to my love and passion for Israel, I've had the opportunity to educate and learn from others in my community, in my high school youth group, USY, and at Rutgers University. I want to encourage other youth to not be afraid to learn perspectives that they may not have heard before, ask questions, and to speak their mind. I would not be receiving this award if I had not done the same. Lastly, I want to thank my parents and grandmother for fostering my love for Israel in every way, sending me to Jewish day school at Kalman Brown Academy, paying for multiple Israel trips through Kalman and Camp Ramah, and supporting my decision to run for USY International Board and go to Rutgers. Congratulations to Mr. Rudoler on receiving the Israel Advocacy Award. It is an honor to be recognized here with you. Thank you again.
All our lives, as long as I can remember, my father has made Israel a part of our lives. Remember when I was a young girl, I was told that a tree had been planted for me in Israel when I was born. So before each of my father's annual visits, I would ask him to visit my tree and water it, and I'd be thrilled when he came home and reported that he'd done so. I'm not going to tell you for how many years that ritual continued, but it's a perfect example of how the love of Israel was quite literally rooted into our lives. I'm sure that Judy and Stuart agree that the love of Israel was one of the strongest threads in the fabric of our upbringing. We were witness to my parents' generous and continued support for schools and yeshivot, and of course JNF. In addition to my father's love for Israel, something else we learned from him is a saying from Pirkei Avot that we heard from him repeatedly, Lo hamidrash ha'ikar ela ha'maaseh, which loosely translated means that deeds are more important than words. My father is a man of deeds who, together with my mother's active and equally unwavering commitment, has consistently, wholeheartedly, and passionately supported Israel and the community with every fiber of his being. My siblings and I and the entire family are thrilled that he's being bestowed this most deserving honor today.
While we often hear grandparents speak about how proud they are of their grandchildren, it's quite rare to hear a grandchild comment on how proud they are of their grandparents. For my cousins and I don't think this feels rare at all. Through his actions, my grandfather has taught my cousins, my sister, and me to always stand up for our beliefs, even if they're not the most popular. Unless, of course, they conflict with his, in which case children are meant to be seen and not heard. He's taught us that sometimes you must go against the grain if it means doing what's right. My grandfather has also taught us a great deal about the importance of generosity, not only with money, but perhaps more importantly, with his time. While this is something I took for granted as a child, I see now just how impressive that truly is. The fact that my grandfather found the time for these various causes while running a business and being a present and loving father and grandfather is nothing short of amazing. We're all so proud of the example he has set for us both at home and in the community, and of the lessons that he has taught so many of us here today. L'chaim.
I wrote down a quote many years ago given to me by Joachim Rudoler. Small steps are only first steps for moving forward. It is true. And it is who Joachim is, someone who always is moving forward. It is how Joachim helps mentor others. It is the story of Joachim Rudoler's life. Move forward, make things happen. That is why I'm so honored to be asked to introduce Joachim Rudoler in receiving the Jewish Community Relations Council of Southern New Jersey Israel Advocacy Award. Joachim never shies away from leading organizations, from his shul to working every day to keeping the Jewish community strong. No one is a greater advocate for the building of the land of Israel for the Jewish people everywhere than Joachim Rudoler. Joachim does not just talk the talk, he takes big steps and moves forward and makes things happen. I've had the opportunity to have Shabbat dinner in Israel with my family and his, and I felt his warmth, the spirit and connection to our past, our present, and our future. I have felt his love. Our conversations today are focused on Jewish educational opportunities and our connection to the land and people of Israel. Joachim wants every young person to have that connection. He does not give up, and we won't give up. Joachim Rudoler, I'm proud to introduce you tonight, and I'm honored that I get to call you my friend.
Good morning, everyone. Greetings from nice, warm, southern Florida and Boynton Beach. The background that you see there is a misnomer. It's due to modern technology and my son Stuart being able to create the background in Yerushalayim, which we're all proud of. I'd like to start off by saying that I'm not going to say thank you to anyone because it's already been said. And the one thing I used to always detest at meetings when somebody would get up and say something and 3 or 4 people would go ahead and say the same thing again. It was a waste of time. So I don't want to waste any time here this morning either. I know we're all anxious to hear what Ambassador Friedman has to say. And by the way, we're also anxious to hear what's going to happen at the Super Bowl. But I want to thank Jeffrey for doing that job for me and thanking everyone. I must say, though, that there is a couple in the crowd that I have to say thank you to, or maybe I should be angry at them. And that's Bob and Pam Benedon. They're the ones that really twisted my arm to go ahead and accept this honor. I really didn't want to do it. It's nothing new to me, but I'm very honored that JCRC has decided to do this and bestow this honor upon me. Thank you very much. Also want to tell Sabrina right away that you may have to use the hook today. I know you told me I can speak for 5 minutes or so, and that's about enough time for me to catch my breath. It'll never happen. To go on, I'd like to go ahead and say something to Rebecca. I've known you since you were a little girl. I've known your mother since she was a teenager. Your dad since he came to Cherry Hill to court your mother. Your grandmother, Ellen, who's been very active at Bethel in the community for so many years. And not to forget your grandfather, Phil, whose motto used to be, at least it was as far as I'm concerned, Phil, we need this done or we need that done. And Phil's response was, no problem. And when Phil said no problem, you could book it, it got done. So thank you again, and stand up and take a bow, if you will. To get to what I want to tell you today, I've been told that I tell a lot of stories, so why break that image? I'll tell you a little story. Many years ago, to be exact, it was 1918, I suppose, when my father, Oliver Sholem, was beckoned to the side of his grandfather who was dearly known as the Zeta Mottel and somewhat of a visionary. And he said to my father, listen, I want to tell you a story. Runs in the family. There was once a captain of a ship who came to a community and said, I'm going to take this ship and the people who want to come with me, I'm going to an island, a treasured island, if you will, that no one knows about but myself. I'm going to stay at that island for 3 days, and I'm going to give you all burlap bags. You can go on this island because it's filled with jewels, with diamonds, with gold and silver, and you can collect all that you want. And I'm going to blow the whistle the first day, and those of you who have enough will come back on the ship, and that's it. On the second day, you people can go out again, collect more jewels and gold and silver, and I will blow the whistle again the second time, and you can come back to the ship. This will happen again on the third day, and you will fill up your bags again. Those of you who have enough will come back to the ship. There are others who will never have enough riches and who will not heed that third whistle that I promised I would blow, and then I would leave and never return to this island. And no one will ever hear of you or know of you, and you're going to be gone. You'll be history. And so it was. He did that, and those people who heeded the third whistle came back on the boat. Everybody went, and so forth and so on. My great-grandfather said to my father, Rolf, you should know something. You are leaving Poland now, and you're going to another land. It's called Germany. I want you to understand that that island is Germany. Don't wait for the third whistle to get out of there. The message for this is very simple. I'm not telling anybody in the United States today to get up and pack their bags and leave America. It is still the best place for Jews in the world, with the exception, of course, of Israel. But please heed and listen for that third whistle. Always be aware of it. Don't let it come out of your sight. When you see anti-Semitism, any place in your neighborhood, any place in the state, any place in the country, don't just sit and talk about it among yourselves. Do something about it. Write to your senators, write to your congressmen, awaken our Jewish leaders, urge them to do something to make sure that this disease is stamped out among us. Be active. Continue to support JCRC and Israel Advocacy. Fight for Israel. Fight against anti-Semitism, anti-Israeli sentiments on campus, in our colleges, every place. It is a danger that I am afraid many, many people in America are not aware of. I'm here to tell you, don't fall asleep at the switch. Don't ever, ever turn your back to remarks and make believe that they weren't made. They were made, and they were meant. And they were meant for you. So, simple message. I could go on, and I just want to keep on urging you. Continue support, continue it through actions, continue it through your gifts that many of you have made today. Continue to support Jewish education, which is the root for the continuation of our Jewish youth. Continue your good work. And thank you for that. I would be remiss if I didn't end my remarks by paying kudos, if you will, to my children who really did without their father for many long hours while they were growing up. They did pretty well without me anyway. But Judy and Steve, and Stuart and Shari, and Simone and Zohar. I thank you from the bottom of the heart for persevering with me, and in spite of me growing up to be pretty good kids. And in the end, I would have to say, Achron Haviv, to my wife, Jerry, of 66 years, who's put up with me through all of this. And believe me, and I hate to admit it because I'm such a chauvinist, but I couldn't have done it without her. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, kids. And if it weren't here on Zoom, I'd give you all a hug and a kiss. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. And
Thank you, Achim. I think you're still in the Zoom world. We logged you off, but you had that really cool technical background. But just know that Judy has a gift of our appreciation for you. It's a beautiful Rockets from Roses sculpture that I hope that you'll enjoy and know how much we appreciate all that you do for us. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Good morning to all here and to all who are joining us virtually. My name is Yaakov Bagley, and I'm one of today's event co-chairs. Thank you to all the staff at the JCRC, the volunteers of the large MEI committee, and to my co-chair, Yafa Fuchs. It has been a pleasure working with all of you on this project. Mazel tov to Rebecca and to Achim on a well-deserved honor. Ponder the following for a moment and ask, what do they all have in common? Number one, during last year's Israel-Hamas conflict, numerous students at Rutgers University were harassed, beaten up, had the tires of their cars slashed, and the Hillel House was vandalized with paint and anti-Zionist graffiti. Number two, December 5th, 2021, a student coming to Sunday school at his local synagogue in Mount Laurel, which is a suburb of Cherry Hill, finds a sticker with a swastika on it and the message, quote unquote, we are everywhere. Number three, December 19th, 2021, swastikas are found in the boys' bathroom of Marlton Middle School, not too far from here, with the words, Hitler was right, written on them. What do they have in common? They have in common that they all turned and reported it to the JCRC in order for us to deal with it. The JCRC spends an inordinate amount of time debating and finalizing how to deal with these incidents. And how do we deal with them? We believe that the best way to fight these incidents, perhaps the only way, is through education. And thus, we create forums for debate, conversations, and educational series to educate the younger generations about the Holocaust, Zionism, and Israel. We must counter the dangerous myths perpetuated through the poisonous BDS movement on campus by showing the facts as they are, by showing the good that Israel does for the world at large. This is done through our Holocaust Museum and Education Center, by educating potential advocates for Israel, and finally by bringing in superb speakers, such as today's ambassador, to educate us about the truth that is Israel. I am very proud to be one of dozens of dedicated volunteers investing countless hours and resources with our JCRC, but we need everyone to help us in building strong connections, combat anti-Semitism, and work with our local officials and law enforcement personnel to keep our community safe and secure. So now is the moment to open your programs or the link in your chat box for those who are virtual and answer the question that one day may be posed directly to you. What did you do to help keep Israel and your local community safe, and secure. I thank you on behalf of all the members of the JCRC for your generous support by being here. Pledge cards are in the program and will be collected after the program. Thank you.
Welcome. Bruchim Habaim. Mazel Tov Achim and Rebecca on a well-deserved honor. My name is Yafa Fuchs, and I am the proud co-chair of this first in-person special event in 2 years. Allow me to thank my co-chair Yaakov Bagley, the professional staff of the JCRC, and the many hardworking volunteers who made this event possible, and of course, our most generous sponsors and attendees. As the holiday of Purim is approaching, I want to quote a verse from the Megillah. It is said by Mordechai to Esther, chapter 4, verse 14. Mi yodea im le'et kazot higat lamalchut. Who knows if perhaps it is for this purpose that you arose to leadership. That verse was what our keynote speaker, Ambassador David Friedman, reflected on Purim Eve as he sat on the plane for his long flight back to the US from Israel after accomplishing some of his most extraordinary and historic achievements, moving our embassy to Jerusalem, establishing sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and of course, the Abraham Accords. No other diplomat has been able to achieve such success in 25 years. He is certainly our angel in the right place at the right time. Reacting to the Abraham Accords, Pulitzer Prize winner Thomas Friedman of the New York Times called it a game changer and a geopolitical earthquake. It is now my pleasure and great honor to introduce Ambassador David Friedman and our moderators, Rabbi Michael Paris of Temple Sinai in Cinnaminson and Rabbi Hirsch Loshak of Chabad Rowan University, who will facilitate this dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Friedman, we're very excited to have you here today. We learned backstage that this is Ambassador Friedman's first engagement, public engagement, since his book came out, so we're very excited. We have a bunch of questions for you.
Thank you.
So I first wanted to mention that everybody will be receiving a copy today of this book, thanks to Eva Marvin Schlenger, who graciously donated it for everybody here today. So I guess to kick off the questions, what we're going to ask first, and I know you detail it in the book a little bit, but here you are, a prominent and very successful lawyer, and great life, private citizen, becoming a very high-level diplomat. How did that happen? And I guess more importantly, what was your drive to go into the public sphere?
Well, thanks, and it's great to be here, and especially this beautiful shul, really gorgeous. It happened, I don't want to be too glib about it, but it was such an improbable, unlikely event that my only explanation is that it was God's will, because there's certainly nothing I did to prepare for this, nothing about my career drove me to this outcome. I was like all of you, go to shul, hang around at the Kiddush afterwards, debate Israel. I'd have very strong views, and other people would argue with me. And I probably took it a couple of steps further. I'd been to Israel probably 100 times. We had a home there. But I didn't do anything really to prepare for it, other than I happened to be blessed with extraordinarily committed parents to the state of Israel, to the Jewish people, to the Zionist cause. I outline it in the book, but my father, should rest in peace, was his entire life, he was a pulpit rabbi for more than 50 years, and almost everything he did was driven off of his desire to build the state of Israel. He grew up in that time. He came of age in 1948. He was born in 1923, so he was 25 years old in 1948. His decision to become a rabbi was driven off of Israel's independence and his desire to be part of that great story. So very much ingrained within my background, and beyond that, it was just the blessings of God that I managed to have a client who became the president with no prior political experience, and one who gave me enormous amount of runway and authority to do the things we were able to do.
Thank you, Ambassador. So Rabbi Loshak and I are part of a civil discourse project where we're really hoping to highlight that even if you disagree, you can sit in a room and you can have a conversation. And I don't think it's wrong to say I'm probably the token progressive Zionist up here. But you reference in the book that your nomination for your ambassadorship faced many forms of opposition. How did you handle that opposition? What was that adversity like? And in retrospect, do you think you could have handled it differently, better? What nobody knows until they're in that situation.
So, I had a life before I was nominated, and like many people who are engaged in public advocacy who have strong feelings, that you can get caught up in the rhetoric, and I certainly did, and said things that I regretted. I was constantly fighting with one particular left-wing organization called J Street, and we fought. I think I certainly let my words get out of hand. But let me just, if I can, use this opportunity to sort of say where I think, and it's only my own opinion, but where I think Israel advocacy, and I agree with you completely about the importance of civil discourse, and I think that there's room for people to be Zionists. You can be a progressive Zionist, you can be a right-wing Zionist, you can be, as long as you're a Zionist, I think you belong in the room and in the conversation. So I have no issues with that. But the real question is how you relate to the state of Israel. The fundamental notion of Zionism are really the words at the end of the Hatikva, right? Liot am chashi ba'aretzenu, to be a free nation in our own world. That the Jewish people in Israel will have autonomy to self-govern. So what does that mean? It means that we in America, we should support Israel. We can participate in any debates we want. We can even offer our views to Israelis when we have the chance, what we think we should do. And every Jew has got an opinion. We're not shy about expressing opinions.
2 Jews, 3 opinions?
Sure. The real question is, do we allow Israel to have the space to reach their own decisions? So by way of example, when I was many years ago in 1993, 94, I thought Oslo was a crazy idea. I thought it would lead to nothing. I ended up being right, because terrorism increased fourfold in the immediate aftermath of the Oslo Accords. But it never occurred to me that I would petition the United States government to somehow stop the Oslo Accords, because that's what the Israeli people decided at that point. That was the result of their own democracy. So the flip side of it is now, Israel is now pursuing what I would say is sort of a center-right government, and they have their views. And my only view about diaspora Zionist organizations is make whatever cases you want to make, but don't ask the United States government, Israel's most important ally, to put their thumb on the scale and to move the government away from their own decisions. So if the government wants to move in a particular direction, don't form a political group that is lobbying senators to force Israel to do something that the Israeli people don't want to do. That's sort of where I draw the line, because then you're not really allowing Israel to be the democracy that we all hope that it becomes. But short of that, I am a strong believer that right, left, center, If you believe in the right of the Jewish people to have their one and only Jewish state, then you are a Zionist and you are entitled, your views are every much as valid as anyone else's.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Sure.
Just to pivot off that question a little bit, but you also mentioned in your book a lot how words have consequences, and when people lobbying over here in America, it has actual effects in Israel. And you saw that to be the case a lot. Continuing in the book, you talk about not just during your nomination, but once you got there, you had a lot of challenges even within the Trump administration, and you talk about, particularly in the State Department. And I think one thing that really shook me was when you mentioned about how someone told you, don't be too Jewish. So I wanted you to talk about that a little bit more.
Sure. Well, the State Department regrettably has a history that's not flattering as it relates to the Jewish people in the state of Israel. You go back and look at the letter that Henry Morgenthau, who was then the Secretary of the Treasury, wrote to FDR in 1943 or 40, I think it was 1943, where he said, you're not hearing this from the State Department, but I just want you to know how terribly the United States has failed in protecting Jews who are being murdered by the Nazis. And of course, since Henry Morgenthau wrote that in the 1940s, there's been a lot of work done on that. And look, by 1943, certainly by 1944, everybody in the United States establishment knew that Jews were being murdered wholesale, especially in Poland and in Hungary. There was in 1944 there were trainloads of Jews being shipped from Hungary to Auschwitz, and the request was made to bomb the tracks, and it was denied. And that really is unjustifiable. It's inexplicable given that there were planes flying over that area. Anyway, so the State Department was behind it. They said, we don't want to make this into a Jewish war. This is us versus Germany. This is not a war about the Jews. It was a mark of shame on the United States and the United States State Department. You go a few years later, in 1948, Secretary of State Marshall was lobbying actively against Truman, recognizing the state of Israel. My experience with the State Department, not as bad, but for example, in the Middle East file, the way the State Department is divided up, it's divided up into regions. So there's an area called NEA, Near East Affairs. So Israel is lumped in with all the other Arab countries. And all the people that work there, I would say 90% of them speak Arabic. I don't think a single one speaks Hebrew. And what they do is they rotate through this. So whoever is sitting at the Israel desk is usually someone who spent most of their career in Damascus or Cairo or someplace else. So the perspective is somewhat warped. And when I got to Israel, it was May 15th of 2017. It was a couple of days before the president was arriving. And I thought it was absolutely essential that the president come to the Kotel. Now, he would have been the first sitting president to ever come to the Kotel. And we had lots of debates, and there were people that worked on Americans that worked for me that thought that it was inappropriate that the Kotel was illegally occupied territory. And look, I'm not a careerist. I'm not looking to get a promotion or a bonus or a good report card. I'm here for a certain number of years, and I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to get fired. But I'm not going to agree that the Kotel is illegally occupied territory. So we began all this. A lot of friction emanated from there. Secretary of State at the time, Rex Tillerson, was not a fan of mine. I think he resented the fact that I reported basically to Trump. And over the course of all this friction, somebody calls me up and says, here's a word of advice, don't be so Jewish. And I said, I'm a big boy. I'm not like, I'm not a snowflake, as they say. I don't get that offended that easily. But I just said, listen, I'm not a big fan of political correctness, but why do the rules of political correctness apply everywhere but against the Jewish people? To me, it was a learning experience, and I was able to learn from that, understand the challenges that I faced. Look, I was told the first week not to go to a Yom Yerushalayim event. It was the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem, and I was told we can't go. No ambassador before me had ever gone to a celebration of Yom Yerushalayim. Now think about it. You know, Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. There have been Jews living there forever until 1948. The Jordanians kicked them out from 1948 to 1967. In those 19 years, the Western Wall was a parking lot for, and not for cars, it was a parking lot for donkeys and camels. And then in 1967, Israel takes it back. They make the beautiful plaza. It becomes open to people of all faiths, Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists, whoever wants to come to the Kotel can come. And I'm being told by the State Department that this is not something worth celebrating. So I was told not to go, and I went anyway. And I sat with the Prime Minister, and that's essentially the whole concept of why the book is called Sledgehammer, because at the end of the day, if you don't break with these, these are thoughtless, wooden, historical positions that have no value in today's world, and that was the whole idea of the book, was that to have to break through some of them.
And I think, agree or disagree, you can't argue with the successes you had in moving a lot of these conversations forward. But I want to go to something specific in the book. In the chapter, If I Forget Thee, O Jerusalem, you talk about the behind-the-scenes process of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital. You're kind of in this environment with other administration officials where they're having to compile a list of the cons and the pros of this potential move. And you get the list back, and it's got no pros on it. So you decide to compile some of the pros as you see it. And I want to ask you about one of those pros. You wrote, recognition will advance the cause of peace by signaling the Palestinians no longer hold veto on significant issues, and that America is no longer wedded to failed practices of the past. In hindsight, do you think that was a little too hopeful, knowing that the Palestinians haven't budged on the peace process despite the recognition of Jerusalem and the Abraham Accords?
Well, the Palestinians haven't budged on the peace process since there's been a peace process, so it's not as if we were going to be any worse off as a result. So, you know, my thinking was this. Let's first look at this from an American perspective before we get into an Israeli perspective or a Jewish perspective. We passed in 1995 the Jerusalem Embassy Act. It passed by, you know, in the House, it got like 400 votes in the House, it got 90 votes in the Senate. And the Jerusalem Embassy Act provides that the United States recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that Jerusalem must remain an undivided city. So we begin with our own laws that say that Jerusalem is undivided, obviously undivided in favor of Israel. Then you go to what do the Palestinians expect out of Jerusalem? And believe me, I've had these discussions. I mean, the Palestinian view is that the old city it belongs to them, with the exception of maybe they'll give sort of an easement for those who know real estate, or a license to Israel to visit the Kotel. That you divide Jerusalem basically all along Route 1, if you know that road, which would result in Hebrew University being on the Palestinian side. The demands are, I mean, my view. Okay, this is not, but based upon my understanding of the Israeli, this is not right or left or religious or secular, but again, it goes back to the Hatikva. Liyotam chashiv ba'arzenu be'eretz Tzion. What is Zionism? Tzion is Jerusalem. Be'eretz Tzion Yerushalayim. The Jewish people are never giving up Jerusalem. They're never going to do it. It's never going to happen. It's a pipe dream. So, why not just get it off the table? Why not just have the United States recognize that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel? Did I think the Palestinians would embrace it? Of course not. But I also thought that at least by saying to the Palestinians, look, guys, we want to, and I've had this conversation with many Palestinian leaders. Look, we want to help you. We think that, and again, there's different dynamics going on in different places. Gaza is Gaza, run by Hamas. Israeli Arabs are citizens with equal rights, and the real complexities exist in Judea and Samaria. But I say, look, we want to help you. We want to create a better environment. But the world is not going to get frozen in time until you decide that the Jewish people can have Jerusalem. I mean, that's just not. We're not going to wait for you to reach that, because that's the reality right now, and we have a president willing to accept that, and the American people have already voted on it, and it's wildly popular. When I used to watch President Trump give these rallies, you know, and I stayed in my lane. I was just on the, you know, Israel-U.S. issue, but I used to watch just, he'd go to these places like, you know, middle of nowhere, you know, no Jews in sight, you know, he'd give these rallies to 30,000 people. The biggest applause line he ever got on any one of these rallies was that he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. I mean, it is an incredibly important to most Americans. So, yeah, I wasn't surprised. I didn't think it would bring a peace with the Palestinians, but I didn't think that it would make things any worse, and I thought it would send a message to the Palestinian people that this is one thing that they're going to have to get over. It wasn't going to be on the table. Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting in that room there, trying to convince everyone. I think with President Trump and different senior cabinet officials, and you talk about it. What did that feel like when President Trump, I believe, says, "Yeah, let's do it"?
So the way it worked was about 3 weeks earlier, I was in the Oval Office just for a couple of days. I was in town for a couple of days, and the president brought it up. He said, "Look, I'm getting so much pressure, both sides on Jerusalem. I made a campaign promise. I have to deal with it. It's coming up on a year since, you know, or half a year since since I'm in office now." And he said, and so, you know, I was there with Tillerson and Mattis and General McMaster, and so, you know, I was ready to, you know, have the discussion that day, but they said, no, we need in the government there's a thing called an interagency process. You should never have to experience one, but it's a process where they decide every government agency that could possibly care about this, and they invite them all to weigh in and everything. So they were pushing this interagency process. It was going to take months, and I got the president to basically say, let's get this done within 3 weeks. And you know, as you pointed out, it took a little while to get it into the right place because there were very few people that shared my views on this. But it ended up 3 weeks later as kind of the final meeting. It was in the Situation Room, you know, below the Oval Office, and it was orchestrated by the then Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who was extremely helpful to this whole process. And basically, it was sort of like a trial. The president was sort of sitting there in the middle of the table. He was the judge, and then there were those who were against. And I was sort of designated as the, if you will, the lawyer for Jerusalem. And it started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I felt enormous pressure that day. That, you know, kind of the weight of Jerusalem was on my shoulders because, you know, it was a small crowd. I had others who agreed with me, but they really weren't, like Jared Kush and Jason Greenblatt weren't invited, and Nikki Haley was on a screen in New York because Tillerson didn't like her and wouldn't let her come. And then I had the vice president who was very supportive, but he was, I think he kind of was sitting more in the judge role than the advocate role. So I knew that I would have to sort of deal with these issues. And, you know, it was, the pressure was enormous. I really prayed very fervently that morning that, you know, we say, every day that we pray, we say Hashem Svatay Tiftach, right? We ask God to open our lips. But this day I really had something to say, so I really wanted to get it right. So I asked for some help. And it was just an extraordinary experience, 2.5 hours of debate. And, you know, I don't want to kill the book because it's an important part of the book, but it really was certainly the single most memorable few hours of my 4 years in office.
Yeah. And, you know, as somebody who's kind of ideologically on the other side of a lot of people in that administration, I found one of the more moving parts of the book was your relationship with President Trump. And you tell this beautiful story about how, you know, after your father died, on the 7th day of Shiva, there's a blizzard outside. And nobody's coming. Everybody's calling at the last minute saying, sorry, I just can't make it. And then out of nowhere, in this blizzard, President Trump shows up. And I found that to be a very moving part of the book. Very humanizing, very humanizing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, if you want to say.
So look, I think that, you know, unfortunately in politics, you know, everybody becomes a caricature of themselves, right? So, you know, your faults are amplified. You know, and if you make a small mistake, it becomes amplified. So, you know, I did have a different perspective on President Trump from most people because I knew him going back to 2003. I had this, as you point out, this very moving experience with him. He came in the snow. It took him 4 hours to get to my house from Manhattan. We sat for a while. There was no one else there. We talked about his father. He had a very, you know, we had some, look, as I say in the book, we have nothing in common, but we have some things in common. You know, we have nothing in common. I don't, you know, I have a beautiful wife I'm married to for 40 years. I mean, my eyes never look anywhere else, you know. I don't, you know, I don't travel in his circles, and I don't spend money the way he does, and I don't live that way. But at the same time, he had reverence for his father. He has an abiding love for his children, concern for his children, as do I. And you know, I just didn't have a relationship with him that started in politics. It started just through being his lawyer and having a friendship with him. If I can tell one story, which I think is, you know, was really, one day we were waiting for a meeting to start, and Tammy and I were in the process of building a home in Jerusalem. And I had nothing else to do, so I pulled out the blueprints to see what the latest plans were. And he looks at it, because he's a builder and he was interested, and he looks at it and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm building a home in Jerusalem." And he says, "Jerusalem?" I'm like, "Why would you build a home in Jerusalem? You know, buy yourself a place in East Hampton or something. You go on weekends." And I said to him, "Well, you know," I called him then Donald, "you know, people have been fighting over every inch of Jerusalem for the last 3,000 years. There's nobody fighting over East Hampton. What do you think is a better real estate investment?" And then he said to me, "Well, you know, why are you buying it now?" And I said, "I'll tell you why I'm buying it now, because I shook hands on this deal in September of 2003. It was the day after our cousin's bride was blown up on the night before her wedding in a terrorist attack. You know, she was sitting with her father. He had just come back for the wedding. She was sitting with her father in a cafe on Amic Rephaim Street and in Cafe Hillel, and she was blown up. So our cousin, instead of having to go to a wedding with his wife, he went instead to a funeral. And I told this to Donald, and I explained to him. I said, "We bought this place, but we're probably overpaying. No one's buying now. We're in the middle of the Intifada. We bought this place. This is I mean, I'm not serving in the army. I'm not living in Israel. This is our way to sort of at least do something meaningful to ourselves, at least if nobody else, something meaningful to show that the Jewish people are never going to be blown out of Jerusalem." And I told him that, and I think it made a real impression, as it, you know, makes an impression on most people when they hear that story.
Thank you. You know, and you do have this relationship, and I'm really curious of a perspective on the president that you kind of speak about in the book. And you talk a little bit about how in Trump in Jerusalem, there was a situation where President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority kind of had gotten to the president and started to sway him that they were more open to peace than the Israelis. And you kind of made a decisive action. You put together a 2-minute video to kind of sway the president to the reality of the situation. But did it concern you as a diplomat that he could be so easily swayed by kind words versus concrete actions?
Look, I think that you have to. I think when it comes to Israel, and the answer is yes. You know, we tend to think of Israel as being this oversized issue in Washington. It's not, right? So this is true of Trump, but it was also true with a lot of other leaders. They got lots of other things to deal with, much more important to their own, you know, individual politics. And somebody had gone to President Trump, who he respected, and said to him, "Look, Abbas is dying to make peace. He's willing to give up Jerusalem, willing to give up refugees, willing to give up, you know, who knows what else. He's ready, and all you have to do is beat up on Netanyahu." So, you know, when I heard that, I knew we were heading towards I thought the president was poorly informed. So I had Bibi York, you know, put together a 2-minute video of kind of the, you know, more traditional Abbas praising of terrorists. And when he saw that, his views did change. Now I got in a lot of trouble for that. You know, I got yelled at by Mattis and Tillerson and McMaster. They said, you know, what kind of a cheap propaganda trick is this? You know, you're putting together a video, you don't tell us about it, you just spring it upon us as well. And I said, yeah, look, you know, guys, you know, I thought the president was poorly informed. I wanted him to get the right views. And, I work for him. I don't work for you. I'm sorry. I'm going to work for the president and give him the best advice I can, as long as I have this job. And if you don't like it, tell him you don't like me, and maybe he'll fire me. I don't know, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that was sort of the relationship.
Thank you.
So moving along to some of your many achievements, so the Golan Heights, and I think that story of Purim and the Megillah with Esther happened with the Golan Heights. You want to expound on that a little bit and how that all transpired?
Sure. So look, I think that for those of you who have had the privilege and the pleasure of going to the Golan Heights, because it's a beautiful place to visit, you can see, especially in the aftermath of the Syrian civil war, how the geography, the topography is absolutely essential to Israel's security. And, after the way we prioritized, the way I sort of set up the agenda, it was Jerusalem first, because I thought it was the most important, and also because we had a law, the United States had passed a law that we were going to comply with. So, and the president had made a promise, so that was the most important thing to do. And then we turned to the Golan Heights, and a lot of people tried to convince the president to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, especially after Bashar Assad started gassing his own people. I mean, it seemed like there was absolutely no reason to extend any courtesies to this butcher. So I was with Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo had already become the Secretary of State. I was with him in Israel. It was the day before. It was actually Erev Shushan Purim. We were in Jerusalem, so it was already Purim everywhere else, but it wasn't quite Purim yet in Jerusalem, because in Jerusalem they observed this the following day. And first I got a call from Jared saying, today would be a good day for the Golan, but the president's not buying it. You want to give him a call? And then I got a call from Bolton. He said to me the same thing. And I asked Pompeo, you mind if I call? So I call up, and I got Trump on I found a secure line, got him on the phone. We started talking. He says, what do you want? You want the Golan Heights, right? That's what you want. You want for me the Golan Heights? And I said, I want the Golan Heights. And he said, give me the 5-minute argument for the Golan Heights. And I go through the importance of the territory, how important it is for Israel, how it fits within our plan. We'll put out a plan one day. There's no question that we're going to provide for Israel to retain sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And then he says, it was a back and forth. He asked me, who am I going to offend? Who's going to be angry? And I said, the only guy you're really going to be angry at you is the guy who's already angry at you. You shot 50-something Tomahawk missiles at him already. I don't think this is going to be any more insulting than those Tomahawk missiles. So he said, you know what? You convinced me. And I said, okay, so when do you want to do it? He says, David, I got a lot of other things going on. I haven't got time for it. Let's just do it. He gives a big yell to Scavino, who's this social media guy, and he says, dictate the tweet to Scavino. Let's get it out. And then, and that was it. And then I called up Netanyahu, who was hoping this would happen, and I said to him, I've got good news and bad news. And he said, David, I can't, I'm on Spilkus here. Don't give me good news and bad news. And I said, we have to go through this. He goes, what's the bad news? The bad news is that I know you were hoping to come to America next week for a ceremony about the Golan Heights. It's not going to happen. And he says, oh, that's terrible news. That's really terrible. He goes, all right, what's the good news? I said, the good news is turn on your TV. And Pompeo was there with me. Now, one last thing about this, because it's really, Pompeo was in town. None of us knew this was going to happen. Netanyahu and Pompeo both adjust their speeches now to deal with the Golan Heights, because that's obviously the most important thing to talk about. And Pompeo gives a speech that, to me, was unbelievable. He starts talking about the Battle of the Valley of Tears, which is the battle in 1973 by which Israel held off the Syrians in the Golan Heights. Now, the tears are not, the tears, it's Syrian tears, it's not Israeli tears, but it's a story about a guy, primarily about, his name is Avigdor Kahalani, and he won every medal you can get at Israel, but he was able to convince the Syrians Israel was down to like 2 or 3 tanks. He was able to somehow trick the Syrians into thinking that they had a whole battalion, battalion after battalion, and the Syrians held off, and they held off until the Israelis were able to replenish their armor, and it literally saved the state of Israel. And Pompeo at West Point, and he finished first in his class at West Point, Pompeo wrote his senior thesis on the Battle of the Valley of Tears. So here he is in Israel, just at the moment when the president's recognizing sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and he's being asked to give a speech, and he gives this beautiful, moving speech about how proud he is that the brave Israelis who saved their country in the Battle of the Valley of Tears didn't die in vain. And I'm sitting there. I had no idea that he had this background on this subject, and it was extraordinary. And then just before we left office, I was able to bring Pompeo again to the Golan Heights, where I found where I went and found Victor Kahalani, and I pulled him out from wherever he was, and I brought him to the Golan Heights, and they met there they met there on the Golan Heights. So it was an incredible experience.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have so many questions, but we're going to shift gears and we're going to pivot for a moment, because at this time we're going to start asking questions from our audience.
Sure.
In the past, we've always put a microphone in the aisle so people could come up, but for health reasons, Rabbi Loshak and I will be reading the questions for our JCRC leaders today. All right? So here we go. This question comes from Yaakov Bagley, co-chair of this wonderful event. What is the solution, in your opinion, to combating the worldwide rising tide of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and what can we do in our local community to counter these issues?
Okay, well, I wish I really knew the answer. It's not, it's not. So far, everyone's been trying to deal with this, and we haven't fixed it yet. No one's fixed anti-Semitism for 3,000 years, and I'm not sure we're going to. But a couple of things. Number one, we ought to be. I know education is important, and of course it's important, and we have to understand better, and we need to be more tolerant. But I also, forgive me for saying, we need to be brutally inhospitable to anti-Semites. I mean, absolutely inhospitable. That means making sure that law enforcement prosecutes anti-Semites to the full extent of the law. I mean, I come from a view that I don't think again, it's my view. I'm not discouraging people from doing other things, but I come from a view that anti-Semites are out there. They're there on the right, they're there on the left, they come in all shapes and sizes, and zero tolerance is really important, both in terms of the people standing up to it. If there's an look at how much worse we are, I hate to say this, as Jews, compared to other ethnic groups when they feel aggrieved. I mean, we're not good at it. I mean, we're sort of, partly because I think we've been blessed with good lives and we don't feel as threatened maybe as others, but we're not good at it. And we need to, when I was a kid, I used to go every Sunday to the Russian mission to protest, to free Soviet Jews. I don't remember the last time there's been a rally, a Jewish rally anywhere on anything, of any size. Elisha Wiesel, who's a wonderful guy, tried to assemble a rally in Washington against anti-Semitism, and this is Elie Wiesel's son, and he got, he didn't get more than 1,000 people. Now it was in the summertime, and you need to get the schools to bus people in. But we need to be more publicly offended by this, because it's deeply offensive. The other thing is, and this is maybe part of the way to get people to be more proactive in fighting anti-Semitism. We need to be more proud of who we are, of being Jews. I mean, we have a spectacular legacy of 3,500 years. We're the people that gave the Torah to the world. We're the people that gave the Judeo-Christian values to the world. We go to Israel. We're praying in the same language, with the same liturgy, in the same place that our ancestors did 2,000 years ago. Nobody in the world can say that. And so we need to appreciate that more. We need to teach our children more. The more that we have a real self-identification as Jews, I don't think it's a problem for anybody in this room, but there's obviously lots of people who aren't in this room. And to make people proud of being Jewish, I think is if we don't do that, everything else is just sort of, you know, I don't think it has much of a chance.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Sure.
Before I get to the next question, I just wanted to pivot off that because I'm a Chabad on campus rabbi. So I know that you answered the question a lot, but for a student that, you know, is on social media and the attention span is very short, let's say, what do you do with those subtle, tweets or Instagram posts that people post and and it's so derogatory towards Israel and the Jewish people? You're all about breaking with the past. Well, what would you answer that student? Or me?
I have a really good friend, Bob Kraft, who owns the Patriots. He's spending $20 million right now on a social media, on an anti-social media, on a way to combat social media. I don't want to present myself as an expert in this area because I'm not. I mean, it's. I don't want to repeat myself, but we're not going to become proud Jews through a tweet. We're not going to be able to tweet our way back into our. I mean, it's much deeper. It's much more. And we have to internalize a sense of Jewishness that. And I think I think if anyone can do it, Chabad can do it. So I mean, get back to work.
Thank you. I like that. Okay, getting to our next question. So our next question is from Jeff Shackett, a former president of the JCRC board. So his question is on Iran. So pulling out of the JCPOA and increasing sanctions on Iran has not slowed their efforts to develop nuclear weapons capability. If re-entering JCPOA is not desirable, I'm guessing that's the case, what new leverage or actions should the U.S. use to reverse Iran's course?
Well, it's a great question and a hard question to answer. But look, my experience with Iran, and based upon the intel that I understood, I'll summarize and say this: I think the only way to prevent Iran from becoming nuclearized is to have them choose between a nuclear weapon and national bankruptcy. They have to confront that choice. And we were on a path, I think, to move them towards that choice. Doesn't mean that they didn't begin to enrich uranium, which they did, and which is what you would expect them to do to get taken more seriously, because ultimately this is a little bit of a game of chicken, and it's dangerous. I'm not minimizing the significance of it. But I think we're on a path right now to what I would call JCPOA minus. We were pushing for JCPOA plus. We're heading to JCPOA minus. We've now lifted sanctions on Iran in certain areas. They're selling oil to China. Their revenues are back up. They're not feeling terribly broke right now, and we're chasing them, which makes them feel like they have all the leverage. So I don't think we're on the right path. I mean, I don't want to prejudge what happens in Vienna, but it looks to me pretty likely that that this will not meaningfully deter Iran. I should also say, for people who think that the JCPOA was better than we are now, the JCPOA deprived the Atomic Energy Commission of inspecting military sites. So just think of how ridiculous that is. If the Islamic Republic of Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon, they're going to build it on a military site. We have the document gave us no visibility into their military sites. We know from the archive that was captured by Israel, one of the greatest, most daring, intelligence operations, certainly the past couple of decades. We know that they were, lying from the beginning. That they said from the beginning, we have no designs on a nuclear weapon. They had all these files about creating a nuclear weapon. So the agreement that was in place, I don't think was meaningful at all in terms of protecting us. The next one, I don't think is going to be that meaningful either. I worry about this because I do think that, there's two things that I question when people say never again, right? Everyone says never again. I ask, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, well, what does that mean, never again? We had, You know, we've in our own lifetimes, we've seen, after the Holocaust, we've seen, 3 million Cambodians that were murdered in the killing fields. We have in Rwanda, there were massive massacres. There's 1 million ethnic Muslims in concentration camps right now in China. So what do we never again? I mean, what are we doing now to stop all these other, atrocities? So to me, at least from the Jewish people, the phrase "never again" has no meaning whatsoever, except in the context of the state of Israel. The state of Israel is the only actual tangible response to "never again." It's only Israel that will protect Jews anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, the United States won't either. I mean, nobody will. So in the same token, the other phrase is, "We will never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon." Again, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know what it means. I mean, the agreement that we're going to make, if we make this, is going to result in Iran having a nuclear weapon. And so I'm not sure and the United States is not going to go to war over this. And so Israel, yet again, is going to be left alone to make sure that Iran isn't nuclearized. And it's a frightening proposition.
Thank you, Ambassador. The next question, just to speed things up, comes from John Korn, who writes, "Ambassador, I want to thank you for your service to our country and applaud you and the former administration for its commitment to Israel and your many accomplishments during your tenure, including the Abraham Accords and relocation of the U.S. Embassy. During your tenure as ambassador, you observed many administration officials resigning their positions, and at time, a number of them said that the president had crossed a, quote, line, and they no longer could serve in good conscience. You stayed to the end of the administration. Did you have such a, quote, a line, and if so, what is it?"
I took this job to do one thing, to strengthen, to the greatest extent possible, the U.S.-Israel relationship. And as long as I was in a position to move that agenda forward, I didn't have any other lines. That was my line, and I was able to achieve what I wanted to do. Now, everybody has their own, everybody works under their own circumstances, and I don't, I'm not here to relitigate any of those events. It's going to take up way too much time and won't convince anybody, but I'll tell you one thing. I mean, again, maybe it's because I knew the president for 20 years, had a good relationship with him, knew that he wasn't anti-Semitic from personal experience. I used to walk out of him in the middle of a meeting at 3 o'clock on a Friday, where, believe me, I mean, if anybody else would have been angry. I'm literally dropping everything because I have to get home for Shabbos, and I never had a harsh word from him. So anyway, that's my experience. People have their own, however people want to prosecute their own agendas and their own red lines and their own beliefs. I respect everybody's views.
Thank you.
Our next one from David Bross, another one of our past Israel Advocacy honorees. And he asks, what was it like working with your Arab counterparts, the Emiratis and the, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Bahrainis, as they were trying to get to the place where they could now agree to a formal peace deal with Israel?
So the first country was UAE, United Arab Emirates. They were, as they say, the Nachshon, the ones that jumped in first. And I'll tell you, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed is an incredible person. I have enormous respect for him. His brother, the foreign minister, Abdullah bin Zayed, I was sitting with him, I think it was past summer, in his castle in Abu Dhabi, and he said something to me which I think is really, very, 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 very brilliant. He said that in modern times, the conflicts around the world are not as much conflicts between nations as conflicts between ideologies. These conflicts exist within nations, and it's basically a conflict between radicals and extremists on the one hand, and moderates on the other. And he said, all we care about is that the moderates win. And he said, we have that in our country, you have that in your country, you have it in Israel, you have it. The moderates have to win. We've allowed the extremists on either side, on the left and on the right, we've allowed the extremists to take up all the oxygen in the room, to get too much power. And the Abraham Accords, first and foremost, is about getting the moderates back together again. And I thought that was so perceptive, and meanwhile, I told this, I did a documentary you can watch on TBN called The Abraham Accords. It's 4 parts. Go to the TBN app on your iPhone. You can scroll and see all 4 episodes. But one part there, just on a lighter note, I said to President Trump that the Abraham Accords were so successful that it's now much easier for me to get a kosher sandwich in Abu Dhabi than in Washington, D.C. And it's true.
Thank you, Ambassador. Our next question comes from Jack Fuchs. The Saudis were not overtly part of the signed accords, although they unofficially agreed to them. What is the status of bringing Saudi Arabia into the accords openly, and what effect would that have on the Middle East relations?
So I'm not sure where things are today. I'm convinced that we would have been able to bring the Saudis in. I think just about by now they would have been in. And it's when the Saudis joined the Abraham Accords, it's going to be a massive change because they are. I think they're the most important Muslim nation. Obviously, they host Mecca and Medina, the two holiest places in the Muslim world. The tell that the Saudis were on board was flying over their airspace. So now, if you go to Ben Gurion Airport now, and you look on the flight board, a third of the flights are to Arab countries, or to either Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Manama, and Bahrain, or to Casablanca. And it's not relevant for Casablanca, but for the other places, in order to get there, if you can't fly over Saudi airspace, it's like an extra 3 hours. And right away, the Saudis said, use our airspace. Now, this is, it may not mean something until you're actually flying there. And, you fly from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi, and you look at that, that flight map, and you see almost the entire flight, you're on Saudi airspace. And no one could have imagined it. I mean, that wasn't, for 72 years, that was just verboten, So now we're flying over Saudi airspace, which tells you a lot. And I think that, again, the key to scaling the Abraham Accords is this. Every one of these accords was a bilateral agreement with the United States sort of standing behind, providing comfort and strength and security, and, in each case a little bit different, but we have to be strong. We have to be a strong country that projects strength throughout the region and stands on principles and that engenders trust. And without going into a political debate now, if those are the ingredients that will scale the Abraham Accords, that's what these countries are looking to the United States for. So that's going to be important for us to do if we're going to be able to scale them forward.
Thank you.
Awesome. To pivot off that, I believe this is our last question, but many people were asking, and people will want to know, so what's next? And have you been in touch, or is there anything that could be done to move the process of peace forward?
So, look, a lot of people are working on these relationships. I mean, they've really grown dramatically. The people have kind of taken them over. So the educators, the universities, the high-tech, the healthcare. I mean, there are flights every day. People are working. It's a very, very warm peace. You contrast it with Jordan or Egypt, where the governments work together, but the people never really got along. The Israelis are having a love affair with countries in the Gulf, and they're getting to know again the Moroccan. Remember, 10% of Israelis come from Moroccan descent. So they're going back to Morocco too. It's a slower process, but in the Emirates and Bahrain, it's incredible what's going on. The next is there's another part that's important that I think Israel needs to focus on, which is I put this at the end of the book, and I mean this with the best of intentions, that Israel has to grow up. And what I mean by that is, if you go to the General Assembly, there's about 190 nations. More than half of them are younger than Israel. I mean, Israel is not a young country anymore. It's got a spectacular economy. Tel Aviv is the most expensive city to live in the entire world. And people are buying apartments, at $3,000 a square foot. I mean, it is the high-tech business there is incredible. Israel is leading the world in 3 or 4 different industries. And they have an incredibly impressive defense force, and they have an intelligence capabilities that, in some respects, are second to none. So, where do they go next? It's been the 6-Day War was 1967, so it's been 55 years more or less since the 6-Day War. They still haven't figured out what they're going to do on their eastern border. It's a long border. It's a very long border. And, people say, well, we're never going to give up this, we're never going to give up that. Well, then why aren't then don't give it up. I mean, but you know, if you live in Ma'ale Adumim or Gush Etzion, which by all accounts are places that Israel says they're never going to give up, and you want to build a house, you don't go to the local zoning board. You have to go to the IDF because the military still has control over anything over the Green Line. I'm not pushing Israel into a particular. I just think there has to be a national conversation about, you know, what Israel looks like. You know, it's time. It's time to start to resolve these issues. We came in. My whole goal was, let's try to figure out. Let's resolve all the issues from the 6-Day War. So what was one? Jerusalem. Okay, check that off. Golan Heights. Check that off. Settlements. The State Department concluded that settlements are not illegal. But just because they're not illegal doesn't mean that, you know, that's the end of the discussion. So now we're down to Judea and Samaria. It's the heartland of the Jewish people. You know, I'm doing a movie this summer called The Bible Road, and it's this Road 60. If you next time you go to Israel, go to Road 60. It's one road. It starts in Nazareth, then it goes to Shlem, right, which is where Abraham came when he came for the first time, which where Joseph's bones were buried. Shiloh, where the Mishkan sat for over 300 years. Beit El, where Jacob had his dream of the ladder going up and down to the heavens. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and Beersheba. It's the Bible, one road, the Bible from top to bottom, with, you know, a little bit often. Well, you know, what do we do about that? I mean, I care about the Bible. It means a lot to me. I mean, I'm just one person, but I think we need to start like just focusing on this. This has been relegated to sort of the, you know, the extreme points of view on either side. There's a lot of people there's a lot of Israelis who just, you know, want to get to the right answer with, you know, and are open to discussion, but the discussion doesn't happen because politically you can't have it. And so I think that's, internally, Israel, I think, has work to do as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. And we live in complicated times. We live in polarizing, hyper-partisan times, but the Jewish community believes in Jewish values. And one of the reasons we have such an interesting take on values is because we understand that there's competing values. Too much justice means not enough peace. Too much peace, not enough justice. It's finding that right balance and making sure we as a community stay vigilant and stay true to who we are. So I'm going to ask you all to join me in this final blessing for peace as we say, Baruch atah Adonai, hu ya'aseh shalom. Blessed are you, Adonai, he who makes peace. And let us all say, Amen. Amen. Let's thank Ambassador Friedman for today.
Thank you.
Did a great job.
So I promise it's brief, just 2 pages, and I'll read quick. So that was terrific. Thank you again. You can pick up. Yep. Joachim, Rebecca, Ambassador Friedman, rabbis, chairs, committee, JCRC board members, and all of you who joined us this morning, thank you and congratulations for making this event so special. Speaking of rabbis, in case anybody was wondering, I don't know if it was mentioned, the 2 rabbis who moderated, Rabbi Priest and Rabbi Loshak, are members of the JCRC board. Rabbi Krupnik is with us in the audience. He got a morning off. I hope he wasn't shaking, you know, seeing other clergy have the bima for a while. And, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's his birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday. Oh, and another birthday. So I am left with zero doubt. Oh, I should actually say, David Snyder, Chief Advancement and Community Relations Officer for the Jewish Federation and JCRC. Good to see so many of you again. It's been a while. I am left with zero doubt that we accomplished one of our key objectives with this year's Middle East Institute in providing a forum to learn a bit more about the U.S.-Israel relationship and our neighbors in the Middle East. As we have joked internally, this was our Super Bowl before the Super Bowl, and there's no doubt that we hit a home run, or I guess I should say a touchdown. As for the fundraising aspect of the program, that will depend on all of you here with us today and via Zoom. As you heard from Rebecca and the ambassador, there is still plenty more work to be done in seeking to educate and engage the next generation of pro-Israel supporters. Please don't forget to hand in your pledge card to a member of the staff or JCRC leadership, or visit the link in the chat box if you're watching from home. Please know that the ambassador will be signing books out in the atrium, and we would kindly ask that you do not attempt to continue the main Q&A session while you're with them at this time. If you didn't already pick up a book, they're available on your way out, so please feel free to grab one. We continue to wish everyone good health and hope to see many of you at the upcoming events and observances listed in the back of your program. Enjoy the rest of your day. Drive safely. And Yafa, what's the last? Absolutely. And a quick shout out to our friends from Friends of Israel. I think we have Jim Showers and Bill Sutter, past and current, CEO and president. And we also have Jenna Pell, member of Cherry Hill Town Council. We also have a representative from Senator Ed Durr's new office here with us. We really appreciate you all coming out today. And again, thanks for those that are joining us online. Have a great rest of your morning.